time you like, Bill.
Okay. All right, Bob, could you, after you'd been captured and you were then on the march and you and your group decided to escape, can you describe how you escaped, and then after you'd been on the run for a few days, how you eventually were captured and your treatment?
How we eventually captured was it just started, we were up on top of this large hill, and we decided to go down into this little house we could see down on the bottom of the hill on the other side to get some food, because we were starting to feel pretty hungry. So we made our way down the hill and picked out this little house, and got over to the side of the house, and there's a couple of big stone jars there. They had nothing in them, so we decided we'd confront the people inside the house and see what we could do. And so we're just about to go around the corner, and this old Korean chap came out round the corner, but he didn't see us, and he was going to his toilet, which was a hole about 5 metres or so, 10 metres across from the hut. And he went over there and he turned around and faced us and pulled down his trousers to go to the toilet, and just then he looked up and saw us standing there. And the one that had been captured the longest, Don Buck, he had red hair, and by this time he had a great big monstrous red beard. And our hair was pretty scraggly and no shave, of course, and our pants were torn and shirts hanging out and what have you. And he looked up and his mouth dropped open and he fell backwards into his toilet. And then he came over and took us inside. He was 80 years old, it turned out, and his wife was just about as old by the look of her. And he gave us some food to eat and told us where all the Chinese were. And thinking that if we stayed around too long and the Chinese or Koreans, mainly the North Koreans, if they caught us in there, they'd shoot this poor old fellow and his wife. So we left and went back up the hill and to wait till it got dark so we could take off again that night. But in the meantime, while we were up there, it started to rain, and we thought, wrongly of course, that we could get across this valley to the next hill, because you couldn't see very far through the rain, and we could be that much ahead by the night. We got halfway across the valley and the rain stopped, and it was as clear as a bell, and there was this great big village just up from us, and we couldn't do anything but keep on walking, which we did, and we got nearly to the other side, and a couple of shots rang out from behind us from the hill we just left. And Don Buck says, "Quick, flat out up the hill." And I said, "I've got to go to the toilet." "Don't be a stupid ass," he said. I said, "I've got to," and him and the Frenchman that was with us took off up the hill, and I dropped my tweeds, and just as I did, the dirt flew up beside me, because the chap, whoever it was shooting at me. So I pulled up my tweeds and I passed the other two going up the hill, and got to the top of the hill and went to go down the other side, and the voices were coming up there, so we turned round. There was a lot of voices, so we turned round, and I reckon only one chasing us from the other way, we'll go back that way. So we went to go back, and there's about a dozen North Koreans coming up. So we hid in the bush, and the Koreans arrived up there, and then it started to rain again. And one of the Koreans stepped into the bush where we were and nearly trod on me. He let out a scream and jumped backwards, and there was a lot of talk, real fast talk went on, and then they all opened up on us with submachine guns and rifles, and bushes and twigs went everywhere. And I said to Don Buck, "What do you reckon, Don?" He says, "Oh, what do you think, Aris?" That was the Frenchman that was with us. And all Aris could say was, "Ooh la la." And well, we said, Don said, I think we better give up. They'll blow us out of here. So we stood up and held our hands up, and they came and got us, and they took my trousers were held up with a 303 pull-through at the time, and one of them took that off me, and so my pants fell down around my knees. Then they tied us up with wire by tying wire around one wrist and pulling your hand behind your back and pulling it up near your other shoulder, and then taking the wire around your neck onto the other arm, so that you ended up with your arms tied behind your back and the wire looped around your neck, which was soft tie wire. And then they told us that we had to march. And I was like, I can't march like this. And they said, you have to. Oh. And one gave me a thump in the base of the spine with the butt of a rifle, and the trousers being around my knees, I just couldn't walk, and I just went flat on my face onto the ground. Then they came over and belted me with a couple of sticks, and then the other, Don Buck and the French soldier, they started to yell out, and so they hit them as well. And then just then, all the voices we could previously hear came up over the hill, and they were Chinese soldiers, and there was a few more than them than the Koreans. And they wanted the Koreans to hand us over, and the Koreans wouldn't, so the Chinese raised up their weapons, cocked their weapons and pointed them at the North Koreans, and the North Koreans started to point theirs at the Chinese, but then they could see that they were outnumbered, and there we were in the middle, with the Chinese and the Koreans yelling out at one another. The Chinese, thankfully, lovely Chinese at that time, thankfully won and took us off the Koreans, and started to march us then for, they didn't undo us, they marched us for about 5 miles, and after about 5 miles, the Koreans turned off and went another way, and then when they did that, the Chinese undid the wire from us, so we were quite free and easier to walk, even though we didn't have, none of us had any boots or socks, we just had bare feet. And away we went for another 5 miles to a village where they proceeded to feed us up with a big heap of rice and sort of little green things sticking out of it everywhere. And we ate all that down. We hadn't eaten for food like that for quite some time, so we were all bloated. So they then marched us about another 5 miles and put us into a little mud hut sort of jail with a couple of Chinese prisoners. And that's where we stopped for a while.
Okay.
And
the next one I want to go on with is, we'll talk about how your hand got infected because you still had shrapnel in it, and the treatment you received, and the letter that was taken home, and the fact that your mother got the letter.
Oh, right, well.
Now, I believe that while you're in one of the camps, your hands got infected from the shrapnel that was still inside it. Can you describe that and your treatment you received?
Yes, that's correct. My hand, we had just decided to escape for the second time, Don Buck and myself, and so we were doing some exercises to keep fit, and there was a crossbar there which I doing pull-ups on, and opened up my wounded hand, and it got bad and worse, and it just blew up. Just you couldn't see any hand. It was just a big swollen mass from the hand up the shoulder. And the Chinese, before that, I was that crook that I was sitting up against a post outside this room that we were camped in, and There's a big whoosh and a noise, and a shooting star, American shooting star jet flew over, and it had been strafing a convoy over on the highway, and the overshoots had come and blown the half the roof of the building off, and shot one of the English blokes through the leg, and hit the pole that I'd been leaning up against a couple of minutes before. Well, after that went over, evidently the peace talks started to be a bit good, and they decided to send an English sergeant that had been shot in the hip, myself and 3 others over, including the POM that was shot through the leg, over to this Chinese volunteer medical team at a Korean village about 5 miles away. So they marched us over there, and the English chap that was shot through the leg, he died after he got there. I wasn't far behind, and so then little Chinese doctor decided to operate on my hand because he reckons gangrene had set in there. So they decided to operate, and he put me out to it in this little mud hut and operated and scratched it all out, and evidently I was saying a few things coming out of the anaesthetic, and I was calling for a girlfriend I had before I went away, whose name was Irene. And after I came to properly, the English sergeant that had already been operated on for a bullet wound told me about the ramblings I was going on with when he took me back to where we were sleeping. Anyway, a couple of days after, a little nurse from the little nurses came up to me and asked me if my wife, she thought the girl I was calling out for after I came out of the anaesthetic was my wife. She said, does your wife know you're alive? And I said, no one knows if whether I'm alive or dead. And she says, well, I'm going back to China in a few days' time. If you'd like to write a letter, I can take it home to China for you and get it home somehow to your people. And I said, thank you very much. And so I did that for her. And then a couple of days later, she came up to me again and gave me this big piece of white rag, which was like a gift from heaven in those days, because it'd be worth a lot of money to them, and they were pretty poor people. And what you do with the rag, of course, is make footcloths out of. And she just given me that, and she was kneeling down in this little stream washing her clothes, and I'm thinking, what a terrific thing she's doing, because it'd be like gold to her. And I couldn't help it, but the tears started to roll down my cheeks, and I'm glad she wasn't looking at me, but I would have thought I was a big sook, I think. Anyway, just then some American planes come over and dropped cluster bombs, and that put an end to things, and she ran off, and chestnuts went everywhere from this chestnut tree we was underneath, and I didn't see her anymore. And the letter got home eventually, and it turned out it was the first communications from a prisoner of war in Korea.
That was the first time that your family had heard that you were surviving?
Yeah.
And did they notify the army?
I'm not sure about that. What happened there? No, the army's notified her. They gave her my mother got the letter from the army. Somehow or other the Americans end up with the letter. It went through the system wherever it went. I'm not sure how it got home, but it went through China and then across to Japan or whatever, and it finally got down there.
Oh, Okay. One of the other people that you had a interlude with was an Australian journalist called Burchett.
Burchett.
Which you had a nickname for, which was what?
Burchett.
Burchett, right.
Yeah.
Can you describe the way in which he came to interview you and the other group of Australians?
Well, I was in the Camp 5 on the Manchurian border, and it was after the peace talks had been going all right, and things weren't picked up a bit, and he wanted to see us down in this room on this camp, and so the four Australians that were there, we went down and went into the room, and he wanted to shake hands, but none of us had put our hands out to shake it. He says, "I'm an Australian," and one of the Australians said, "You're not an Australian backside," sort of thing, a few other words, and can you stop for a minute?
You're talking about...
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to say it the same as I said to you earlier.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. Just continue in what you remember.
All right. Well, he then said, "Well, I'm here to talk peace and that, and what did you come over here for?" And Big Tom Hollis says, "To kill as many bloody communist bastards like you as I could," which didn't go too well with Mr. Burchett, and he came back with the Americans are nothing but imperialist warmongers and throwing germ bombs around and everything. And I said, "Well, there's plenty of germs over here already. They've got enough germs in Korea, and you're the biggest one." And he didn't like that either. And then Big Tom was starting to get a bit hot under the collar again, and so it took Don Buck and Mo Guather and myself all our time to quieten him down a bit, and Burchett got a bit uptight about that, and he just left then.
And you had another altercation with him later on.
Oh yes,
going down on the trucks.
When we were released later on in August 1953. That altercation was about 1952, I think. In 1953, when we were being released, we've been driven in these Chinese trucks from where they'd set us up for the night, just out of the demarcation line near Panmunjom, and they had this bridge across there called the Freedom Bridge, and these trucks were supposed to drop us off near the bridge, and we walk across what they call the Freedom Bridge. And as we were going up to this bridge, who should be walking along behind us was Burchett, and he's trying to talk to us, and in the truck there was only myself and another Australian, Don Buck, and a mob of POMs, and he just got drowned out with all the abuse. You couldn't hear him. He's trying to yell and talk to us, but just everyone just told him what to do, and that's the last I saw of him.
Right. Okay, if we go back to Camp 5, can you describe the living conditions there when you arrived?
When we arrived?
Yeah.
When we first arrived there from the bean camp, no, we'd escaped in between then. No, from the Peace Fighters camp. When we arrived up there from the Peace Fighters camp, it was cold. It was 40 degrees below zero, and we were all put into this one big room. There was lots of big rooms, but the one we were in, there would be probably about 50 people in the one we were in, and we were jammed in that tight that we all just huddled up together for the warmth, and we were in that room for a couple of weeks like that or more, and people were dying from the cold and everything, and they'd come around every morning and ask if there was any dead, and we'd say no, but they'd be propped up against the wall. Someone would be holding them up. They were dead, but they were holding up, because if they were removed out, the rations would be cut down, the food rations. So they were just a dead fella sitting up beside you for a few days, and when you're allowed to lie down and go to sleep, everyone was jammed up against one another, and on a given word, everyone had to roll over at the same time. Well, that was a couple of over 2 weeks like that.
What was the food you were given? What was the food you were given?
Oh, the food at that time was a mixture of ground up millet and sometimes a few beans. But it was only once a day at that time, and wasn't much at all really. And there was no utensils or anything like that. And it was only whatever you'd found along the way somewhere, whether you had an old ration tin or something to use for a cup or something like that. Otherwise you just got it in the hand, and if you wanted chopsticks, you had to use chopsticks you made from a few twigs you found. If you went to the toilet, it was just a hole in a ditch, and the only thing you had to wipe your backside on was twigs. And that's how it was in those times. And I mean, we had a pole right along this big ditch that we dug for a toilet, just a pole along there, and everyone's perched on the pole like birds on a fence out in the bush, and all their piles were hanging down and bleeding and everything, and there you are sitting in a long row with all the blokes going to the toilet.
I believe while you were in that camp that originally, though, sorry, I should go back. Originally, when you were captured with another chap from your platoon, Slim Madden.
That's right, that's correct.
Right. And you hadn't seen Slim since you'd left behind in the bean camp.
In the bean camp, that's right.
But while you're in camp number 5, you had a mystic experience.
That's correct. This particular night, this particular time, I was lying on the floor in the hut, and of course it was very cold, and I was a bit chilly on it. And previously I'd been standing to attention outside in the cold because I'd abused an American Red Indian that was in charge of our hut. He was a progressive, and he went with the Chinese, and I had a bit of a fight with him, and he dobbed me into the Chinese, and they made me stand to attention for about 4 or 5 hours out in the cold weather outside. And that's why I was so cold lying on the floor there. And as I was doing that, I was looking up at the ceiling, and in through the ceiling where the walls met the ceiling, the join floated this figure, and slightly tilted up, and they're floating across the room, and as it went past, the head turned and looked down at me, and it was Slim Madden out of my section that was captured the same day as me. And as he looked down, he says, "You'll be okay, mate." And then he looked round again, and it just floated away. And that's last time I saw him. And later on, of course, a few years ago, in 1991 I think it was, I visited the war cemetery in Busan in Korea, and they had his grave there. And I went and looked at it. I couldn't work out whether he'd be there or not, because he died way up on the Manchurian border, and I don't know whether they got his what was left of him from up there, and brought it down there, or whether there was anything there or not. And I just couldn't get any feeling. But I've just been back there this April, and I saw it again, and I got a feeling there this time. Yeah, and maybe he came down.
You also had a mystic experience from the girlfriend.
In the where?
From the girlfriend?
Oh yeah, that might have... Yes, well I received a letter when things started, got good and it was nearly the finish. They let us receive mail, and you could send mail home and you could receive mail. And my girlfriend had got an envelope from my mother, who got it from the army, the Red Cross, who we were from, and she gave a girlfriend an envelope, and the girlfriend wrote to me, and it was a Dear John.
Or in your case, a Dear Bob.
A Dear Bob. And she told me that she'd found someone else, or someone else had found her. And I thought, well, but probably the best thing, because we just made up our mind to escape again the third time. And this time we were going to pull all stops, and anyone, before we'd given in too easily, not too easily, but this time we weren't going to give in. We were going to go, and that was that. So probably a good thing that she has found someone else. But there was an American there from Texas, would have to be from Texas, had made himself a guitar, and he used to make up songs, and he was singing this song, Good Night Irene song. So he got onto my case, and he made up a few words to it, and he used to sing this song to me. And so I told him, because you had to laugh in places like that. So I told people about my Dear Bob letter, and that's one of the things I get enjoyment out of. See, and he made it better by doing that. Like down in the bean camp, for instance, there was an American there he'd been shot through the jaw with a .45 bullet, and it stopped there, and he was stuck with his mouth open. He couldn't eat anything, he couldn't talk properly, he could only sort of half drink anything. And we used to tell him funny jokes to make him laugh. And sounds a bit, silly, but you could see his eyes light up even. It was those sort of things.
When you were captured the second time after you escaped,
and
you were recaptured, you didn't get such good treatment. What
No.
was your treatment?
So we had to sit.
You were put in a hut,
We're in this mud business with a little skinny door and two tiny openings. One opening for the guard to look in, another one up the top for a bit of air. And we had to sit on this platform, which was made of pine poles, all different thickness and bends and shapes and knots in them. We only had light clothing on, and we had to sit with our knees up under our chin and our hands on our knees, back up against the wall, from 4 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. Once during the day you could relax while you ate the food that they gave, which wasn't much, more millet and some beans, and sometimes a drink of water. And you couldn't go to the toilet. You had to just do it in your pants, or you're just jammed. There's about 24 of us in this little small room on this platform. And I called the guard one day, and I'd done mine in my little blue cap I had, people's cap, and he put his head at the opening in the door and stuck his head in there, and I let him have the cap and all, which got me belted over the head with a club for a while. And another day, Keith Gwyther from Victoria and myself were caught talking, and we both had to kneel on these poles for a while. Then they came in and belted us till we were unconscious with clubs and those sort of thing. And another thing they had there, they'd stick a stick through a hole in the wall, and you had to sit on this little platform thing and lean forward, grab hold of the stick in your mouth, and the guard would walk past outside, and sometimes he'd go like that with it and it'd go across your mouth inside. Other times he'd hit it that way and it'd go down that way. And the other things they did once to me, and a lot of times to others, is tie your hands behind your back and throw her up over there, the rafter up there, throw your rope over the rafter and pull you up, and then pull the rope down and tie it off down onto one of the things there, and you're standing up on your tiptoes, and you've got the thing on your wrists at the back. And the other one they did to me, they tie your hands and just behind your back, and then they put the rope round your neck, up over the rafter, and pull it down till you go up on your tiptoes. Then they tie the end of the rope round your ankles. And so you're standing on your tiptoes with the rope round your neck, and you eventually fall over. But I must say they were decent. They didn't let you choke. They just let you drag for a little while.
What was your feeling when you walked across the bridge and you were free? When you walked across the bridge and you were free?
More tears. Walking across there, and I saw these big American, when I got the other side, I saw these big American provos, or MPs, military police, and they were so big and strong and healthy, and they grabbed hold of us and led us over to these trucks, ambulance-type trucks. And they put us in there, and they took us down to a place where they were going to interrogate us and all that, and they took off, and we hadn't been in anything fast, or even the trip down from the Manchurian border to the release area. When the train was slow, they just crawled down all the way, and they were only doing about 15 kilometres an hour, and I thought they were going to tip over, and we're hanging onto the sides of the vehicle, and they're very frightening. And then we got to where we were going, we were interrogated, and then they dusted us all down, mind you, and what is banned these days, I think, is a DDT and whatever you call it. They just dusted us all over, and then they they put us in the care of a Red Cross person by the name of Phil Damon from Tasmania. She got us all our new uniforms and put them on, and then they let us, after all this, they let us go for the night with a mob of Kiwis of all people who were camped there at this place, and they took us into their tent and filled us up full of beer, and you wouldn't want to believe it, but they all flaked out but us. We hadn't had a drink for 2.5 years, probably, 2 years more. And they were all flaked out, and we didn't, and except my mate, when we stepped out of the tent, he tripped over a tent rope and fell on his face, but that was the sort of it.
Thanks very much. That's it. That's a take, as I say.